Hey everyone, welcome to a Thursday edition of the Roto Grinders Daily Fantasy Fix presented by FanDuel.com. I am Stevie TPFL filling in once again for our good friend Dan Bach. He's on vacation this week, so I've been doing the podcast for him. And I looked at this Thursday slate. I seen a good 5-game slate. I seen that FanDuel.com has a bunch of tournaments, games, all kinds of stuff going on. So I figured we'd get the podcast going. I'm actually a little later than I thought it wanted to do today, but internet doesn't always agree with what we want to do. So it's amazing how much we rely on internet nowadays, but it is what it is. And, it's fixed now. So recording the podcast, but I'm not Dan, and Dan does so good with these types of topics, but I wanted to bring up just the thing that's going on with New York right now. It looks like for the near future, it's not going to be the greatest thing, but if they could get something passed, it would be a good stepping stone for a lot of states, in my opinion. So it's one of those things where it doesn't look great right now, but in the future, it could easily be something that is a stepping stone for all the states. So if you want your voice to be heard, it's very important that, you get your voice heard at this point in time. So you can always go on the Roto Grinders forum. We have a sticky page for support fantasy sports for all. You can click your state. You can find out what's going on there. I recommend everybody that listens to this podcast go ahead and do that, because you don't have to know what's going on, but it's really smart that you're paying attention to everything and, making your voice heard. Now's the time to be heard. So I highly recommend doing that if you haven't done it already. If you've done it already, it doesn't hurt to do it again. So that's just my opinion. Like I said, Dan does great on these topics. I'll leave those for him. I'm here to talk some basketball, so that's what I'm going to do. We did the podcast yesterday with Jeff Collins. Wish him the best of luck out at the FanDuel Championship this weekend. I really hope that he can finally bring one home. That would be really great. He keeps qualifying for these live finals, and he's one of the best tournament players that I know. So I'm really excited. I hope he takes that down. But without further ado, let's talk about some basketball games for tonight. We'll start off with New Orleans at Indiana. New Orleans dealing with a lot of injuries right now. Anderson's already been ruled out. Of course, Anthony Davis shut down for the rest of the season. The biggest news that you want to pay attention to, luckily this game's a 7 o'clock game, is Norris Cole listed questionable coming into the game. Even if he plays, we don't know what type of role he'll see. But you have to continue to pay attention, because the biggest person that's going to affect right here is Jrue Holiday, who has been fantastic over the last 3 games, playing at least 36 minutes in each of those 3 games with over 35 fantasy points in each of those games. His price at $8,200 makes him an interesting option on this slate, because if you think about it, George Hill, Indiana, they're pretty good on point guards. So I'm not saying he's a lock, but I like him if Cole's out again. And another guy you think you can look at here, which I don't love that he's a point guard on FanDuel, but you have to pay attention to Tony Douglas, playing over 30 minutes in 4 of his last 5 games, over 20 fantasy points in each of those last 5 games. And he had a good game against Golden State the other night. So really want to pay attention to the Norris Cole news, because if he's out, Tony Douglas should get a nice bump again. And at 5,100, he's a guy you can look at in all formats. Easy 5X value. Should see some Monte Ellis, which always helps guys out, because Monte doesn't play the best defense. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. The big situation, the minutes are all over the place. I know a few of us targeted Omar Asik with the news that Davis was out and Anderson was out. Asik only played 21 minutes in that game, but he still had a good game in terms of fantasy. 20 fantasy points for a guy that's under 4K. We'll take that every time. But I think that the minutes are something to worry about. But if you want to take a shot on him, I do not mind it. The Indiana middle-of-the-road defense against centers this season, so I don't mind that at all. Now, looking at the Indiana side of things, Paul George, 9,000, more of a dark sleeper tournament play. Should be low-owned because of the slate tonight, but I just don't see the upside, don't see the floor here. Indiana pretty much locked in right now, and New Orleans not really playing for anything. Big favorites here with 13 points, and not a lot to like on the Indiana side of things. If I'm going to target one guy, it's usually going to be Monte Ellis at 6,500 at a shooting guard position that outside of maybe Jimmy Butler and Drew Holiday, it's a tough road tonight. McCollum coming off a game last night where, he played 37 minutes, but the shot was, he's having a tough time with the shot last night. So that was interesting. But honestly, on the Indiana side of things, I'm not going to be playing too many of these guys tonight just because I'm worried about minutes. I'm worried about a blowout, and there's really not a lot to like. Cleveland at Brooklyn. Speaking of something that's very interesting, the Vegas line in this game is really interesting. Cleveland's only favored by 6 points in this game. So with it being a 7:30 game, I would be very cautious to roster one of the stars here on Cleveland, because the Vegas line really says to me that, Vegas is kind of maybe expecting one of these big guys to sit, because there's no reason that Cleveland should only be a 6-point favorite. It is on the road, but Cleveland's a much better team than Brooklyn. Brooklyn's out of it. They have nothing to play for. So honestly, looking at the Cleveland side of things, if we get news before lock that one of these guys are sitting, you have to give a bump to the other two guys. If maybe two of these guys are sitting, then the other guy almost becomes a must play. But one guy that I do like for tournaments tonight because of his price tag is J.R. Smith. 4,300 on FanDuel tonight. Brooklyn not too good against shooting guards the whole season. So going to continue with the trends. J.R. Smith's a guy that has that 30-point upside because once he starts shooting, he doesn't stop. 3-point threat. So I like J.R. Smith in the tournament. And like I said, pay attention to the news. You get news before lock that one of these guys are going to sit. You got to bump the other two guys up. Brooklyn side of things, there's not a lot to love here for Brooklyn tonight. Brook Lopez is only 8,100 on FanDuel. He presents some upside, but he's been all over the place lately. His minutes are still there, still playing a good heavy of minutes, but he really hasn't done much outside of the last game. Thaddeus Young is coming off of a game where he played really bad against a really bad defense. But his price tag at 7,700 makes him tough to play against a Cleveland front court defense that has been excellent all season long. So he's tough. The one guy that I would probably look at maybe in a tournament, and only a tournament because he hasn't done much lately, is Sloan. He's been struggling, but I don't mind him, and maybe a deep sleeper is Shane Larkin, those two guys in a tournament. Outside of that, I've been rostering Kilpatrick a lot. He's been a guy that he's always under-owned in tournaments, and he's still under 4K on FanDuel. So if you want to take a shot in the dark like I've been doing, I don't mind it. If he gets the 20-plus minutes, he's almost got that 5X every time. So he's a guy that I'll look at in tournaments tonight, but that's about it. On the Cleveland and Brooklyn game, Chicago at New York. Chicago favored by 5 here. Pretty interesting because these two teams just played last night. So, kind of know what's going to happen. Pau Gasol is the biggest news here. Gasol's on that 25-minute limit. I haven't heard anything if they're going to restrict him again tonight or lift that minutes restriction. So you want to pay attention close to that. Derrick Rose, 30-point monster. He just continues to be consistent around that 30-point mark at his price tag. He's unplayable in tournaments for me. If he fits into your roster construction for a cash game, I don't mind it. Jimmy Butler, his price tag is up there as well. Played 36 minutes in this game last night, only put up 29 fantasy points. I'm kind of thinking around the same. If you want to roster him, I don't mind it in a tournament. But I think he's going to be a tournament option only. I think a lot of that had to do with Mirotic last night, just having a great game. He exploded in that game. So you want a deep sleeper, maybe Mirotic at 4,700. Like I said, coming off a monster game against New York last night. But the one problem that I have here is people are going to realize that he had a monster game against them last night, and they're likely going to play him again. Gibson only played 20 minutes in that game last night, so he cut into a lot of his minutes. So it's interesting for Chicago. Honestly, I don't like a lot to do with Chicago tonight, but looking at the Knicks side of things, Carmelo is a guy that I targeted last night. I'm going to go back to the well here for Melo if he plays, which I don't see a reason why he wouldn't play. I like him. Chicago struggled with the three all season long. They've been bottom five against the three for majority of the season. So I do like Melo in this matchup against Chicago tonight. I think he's in a good spot, 8,700. A little bit cheaper than a guy like Durant, but looking at his price tag, I might go down to Hayward. It all comes down to lineup construction and things like that. But I do think Melo's in a good spot. We talked with Jeff about Jose Calderon coming into last night, and he put up 29 fantasy points in this game last night. And I hope Jeff rostered him because at 3,800, that in there. So I don't mind him in tournaments again tonight. We've seen what he could do in this matchup last night. I'm expecting his ownership to be a lot higher than it was last night, but I don't mind him. And Aaron Afalo had a good game. He's so shaky that he's a tournament option only anyway, and his ownership might actually be higher because of that. Porzingis, I like him. He's under 6K on FanDuel, coming off a good game. We've been targeting the Chicago Bigs all season long. I like Porzingis again tonight, and I like Lopez again tonight. I know Lopez put up 39 fantasy points last night, and I'm expecting another double-double, another good game out of Lopez tonight. Utah at Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, almost a 10-point favorite here, 9.5. Coming into this game, this is probably one of the best basketball games on the night, but it actually has the lowest over-under of the night, the lowest total. We're not going to spend too much time on Oklahoma City. Westbrook, Durant, always elite options. I know this is an elite Utah defense, but these guys are just so good. They're matchup proof. If I had to choose one or the other, I would probably go Westbrook over Durant. I always play Westbrook over Durant, except for the other night or anytime that Durant gets to face another star, then I'll play Durant. But Westbrook is the guy that I'm going to target for Oklahoma City tonight. Outside of that, Cantor 5,400. He's been playing really well. His minutes just restrict his upside. If the guy ever got to play 30, 35 minutes, he'd be fantasy gold. He does not, so that is something that you want to pay attention to. Serge Ibaka, 5,200. In this matchup against Utah's bigs, I do not want any piece of Ibaka. One guy that I do like in this game is Shelvin Mack. Mack, 6,300. That price tag would probably scare some people off if they haven't been paying attention to what Shelvin Mack's been doing. And he's just been a 30-point machine with 30 fantasy points and 6 straight coming into last game against Houston. Didn't hit that last night. But I like his bounce back potential here in a game against Oklahoma City. Faster paced game for Utah, giving them guys a little bit of a bump. I like Mack and I like Hayward in this matchup. Hayward against Durant, going to want to prove himself against Durant. His price tag at 6,700 makes him playable. Don't like any of the bigs for Utah tonight. If I had to roster either one, I'd probably roster Favors. But the price tags on these guys, Rudy Gobert, 6,200 is interesting, but just hasn't done much lately. So it'd be Favors if it's anybody, and that would be all depending on where I'm sitting. Portland at the Clippers. Interesting game here. This game, Portland's just in a must-win situation. They want to keep winning. They won that game last night against Dallas. They're riding the momentum into LA tonight. So this is an interesting game. We know that for Portland, the Portland side of things, Myers Leonard is doubtful at best. He hasn't officially been ruled out, but there's a good chance he doesn't play again tonight, which means my boy, Mason Plumlee, a guy that I've been rostering in tournaments a lot. I like him again tonight. 5,200. I think he's another tournament option again. Ed Davis, these guys, they have upside for tournaments, but their minutes are so shaky that you have to pick one and take a shot on them. I would take a shot on maybe Ed Davis. That's about it. Harkless started last night, played 25 minutes. You're going to want to pay attention to that news to see if he starts again tonight. McCollum, 6,900. His price tag, I think, limits him, but I say that, and he has 40 fantasy points in 2 of his last 4 games. So, he's very capable if his shot's falling to score a lot of fantasy points. Lillard against Paul. Lillard's usage is through the roof this season. one of the safest options every night to get you 35 to 45 fantasy points. I like him again tonight. I like the matchup against Paul. I think these two guys get going game inside the game, and I think Lillard to have a good night. 8,900. I think he's a good option. But looking at the other side of things, Paul 9,900, coming off of a very disappointing game. He was very highly owned last night, and I think that he has a good chance to bounce back tonight. And I think his ownership would be down because he burnt so many people last night. So I do think Paul is in play tonight. I think that Lillard and Paul are probably going to be highly owned just because of where they're at, and you're going to want to fit in some Westbrook there. So it's an interesting night for ownership for point guards on FanDuel with two guys being rostered. JJ Redick, 4,900. He's been up and down, up and down, up and down. He has the 25-plus point upside. I don't know if this is the matchup that I want to target him in. I would take a shot on him in a tournament. That's about it. And DeAndre Jordan, we like targeting centers against Portland, and DeAndre Jordan is a guy that is going to play 35, 36 minutes, and he has the upside. He showed it last night with 51 fantasy points against Golden State, and he should have a good game here against Mason Plumlee if he's used the right way. So I do like DeAndre Jordan. He's probably one of the safest options for cash games as a center tonight at 8,100. I think he's in a good spot, and probably a guy you can roster in all formats, but I do like his floor in this matchup against Portland at home at 8,100 on FanDuel. Well, that was the game-by-game rundown of what's going on in the NBA tonight. And like I said, don't forget to check out FanDuel.com. They got a bunch of stuff going on with the Slam. They got a bunch of stuff going on with college basketball right now. That kicks off tonight, and if you haven't been following college basketball, that's okay, because in a podcast form or a video form, you can re-listen to the show that was Wednesday night talking college basketball here at RotoGrinders. So if you haven't been paying attention to college basketball, you can check that out, plug in some lineups for tonight's 7 o'clock lock, and play some college basketball. Don't forget to have hockey and the baseball contests are announced. I'm excited for baseball season to get here, and it's almost here, and I'm pumped. I know I sound pumped, but you have to remember, I've been frustrated with internet issues all day today. Well, that pretty much wraps us up for the podcast today. Good luck in your contests tonight, and I will see you again tomorrow with another special guest. Until then, good luck tonight.